Welcome, everybody. It is wonderful to see you. I'm joined by my colleagues, Rabbi Sidney Mintz and Rabbi Matthew Gewirtz. I know folks are coming onto the webinar now, and we see you joining us. We're so glad that you're making time for us today. And we thought it'd be really special. Actually, our special guests today are our children, and my dog just jumped in. But we were going to introduce our kids one by one. And but what we want to focus on is how we've been navigating this pandemic, teenagers, college students, millennials. And since we realized that in our own homes, we have those very folks, we wanted to talk to them about this and think about how this experience of the last year is helping them as they write letters to their future selves, as it were. Rabbi Sidney, Rabbi Matthew, please, what would you add? And then we're going to introduce our kids.
I just start by saying, on behalf of all of us, it's an honor that our kids have trusted us enough to get on the screen with us and to share with us. And for me, I feel like my kids have taught me a lot this year, and I'm really appreciative of the wisdom they've shared with me through the lives that they've been living.
And I would just say that the patience that they have displayed in having their lives disrupted so randomly, and how we feared for them in ways that everyone could take turns imagining, that they've showed us a sense of resilience and grit that has just been extraordinary. And I don't know if I would have been that way myself at that age.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to introduce our kids. So I'm going to start. Right here with me is Nomi Zweiback. I'm lucky that we get to be in the exact same, we're actually in the same space here. Amazing. And we're joined by her two sisters, Isa and Ariella Zweiback. If you can turn your video on. Why don't you each say hello real quick?
Hi. Name's... Who's going on? I'm Ariella Zweiback. I'm the middle daughter. I'm a freshman studying gender and women's studies and public health at the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
I'm Isa. I'm the oldest child. I'm a junior at Tulane studying art history.
And I'm Nomi. I'm the youngest, and I'm a junior in high school.
Sidney, why don't you introduce, hopefully we're going to have both of your sons with us, but we're going to start with one.
Yes, Gabe will be joining us hopefully around 4:45 once he is done with work. And I'd like to invite Eli Newbern Mintz, my son, who we're separated by a bridge right now, but we're in the Bay Area together. Eli, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Eli. I am 25. I live in San Francisco. I work in the finance department of a health insurance technology company.
Okay, and Jake, why don't you come on the screen? This is my eldest of three, Jake Gewirtz. And Jake, why don't you say hello to everyone?
Hi, I'm Jake. As my dad said, I'm the oldest, and I'm in 11th grade in high school.
We're so grateful to you all for being with us. The first question, I just wanted to ask, and you can each answer it. If you feel like you want to pass, that's okay too. But given the experience that you've been in these last 12 months, and we referenced at the beginning some of the beautiful moments that we've had in terms of our family moments, and also some of the challenging, difficult moments, especially for the adult children, coming back and all of a sudden being back with their parents at home, and that's kind of crazy. But we're interested in hope. Are you feeling more hopeful about the future today than a year ago, or less hopeful, and why? And maybe Eli, since you're the oldest, maybe you can go first.
Yeah, I would say, I don't know. I mean, I'll start my answer, and then maybe I'll come to some conclusion. But I sort of think what I've learned about our society is that there's kind of a beauty and a tragedy in the human condition, which is our ability to adjust. And the beauty of it is that, those of us that are still here are, working hard to find meaning in our daily lives, and are able to kind of have makeshift ways of connecting with one another. I think the tragedy in it is the fact that we as a society have tolerated so many deaths, and when you think about 500,000 people dying in a year, it's a pretty flooring number of people, and to still kind of push on. So I would say I think maybe there's areas of hope, but also it's definitely some dark things that I've learned about our society.
Thank you, Eli. Isa, Ariella, either of you want to share a response?
Sure. I definitely would echo a lot of what Eli was saying, just in terms of there being both tragedy and hope. But today I'm feeling very hopeful because I got an email about in Los Angeles, as soon as April 15th, all people over age 16 are eligible to get vaccinated. Likewise, in New Orleans, all people over the age of 16 are now eligible to get vaccinated. So looking into the future, it seems like things are getting better. Very narrow-sighted perspective, but that's how I'm feeling right now.
I'd have to agree. I also think that this whole experience has taught me a lot about how fast we can adapt to obstacles and struggles, which is always an important thing to know about humankind, because we're likely to interact with another scary or challenging time in our lives. So to see how fast we adjusted and changed our worlds to make it better is incredible.
Thank you.
I also feel hopeful today, more hopeful than I did a year ago, more hopeful than I felt like even 3 months ago. But yeah, because of vaccine rollout and also the election and everything that happened and the outcome makes me feel calmer about society. But yeah, still very stressful one.
Yeah, that was a whole nother layer to this all, was of course the election season. Jake, how about you?
Yeah, I would agree with everything that everyone said. I would say right now at this moment, I'm definitely feeling some of the most hope I've had in the last year or so, as it's about to be spring and summer and vaccines are rolling out, and a lot of my friends are getting vaccinated, and hopefully me soon in the next month or so. And I think the world is definitely starting to turn the right side up these last few weeks and months, and I'm ready for it.
Thank you.
I was thinking, and I'm not sure if I know the answer to this question myself, and I'll just we'll go to Zweiback's in New York. What has scared you the most this year? What happened when you said, "My goodness, like this really is scaring the living daylights out of me"? And how do I? Well, I guess if you can name that moment, and then if you're able to talk about how you reacted to it, and what you did about that.
Honestly, this whole pandemic, I think the scariest thing is to see just how divided our country is. I think that struggling with people who don't want to wear masks, people who deny science, I think that that's been a really eye-opening experience, especially living in Wisconsin the past few months. It's been incredibly surprising to see just how hard it is for us to agree even on the most scientifically proven hard facts, and that's really a scary situation to come to the realization of, especially as like a young adult who wants to be involved in policy and politics. It's frightening.
I would agree with that. Just, I guess, going to school and being in a college campus and college area, just like the general lack of care, respect, disregard from some of my peers about like humanity as a whole. Like, shouldn't we all care about everyone and not just ourselves? So I think that's been like recognizing that as a truth has been very challenging, of course, and dealing with just people being sick.
And you feel that as you walk across the canyon, you actually feel a lack of humanity that's palpable to you.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Jake?
I don't know. If anything, I would say what happened over the summer. Just because I feel like in a moment where we're in a pandemic, you would hope and you would think that the country would unite together, but instead you get a divided nation over riots, over everything, over protests, and it's just become, I don't even have words for it, but it was just frightening to see that the nation could become so divided in a time where you would think that people need to be the most united.
Yeah, we could go into this later. We live in a town that's one of the most progressive towns in the tri-state area, not just in name but in action. And but what's come with that has been a huge amount of judgment, especially on high school students. And again, we can go into that later, but we have experienced it in such real ways and very painful ways. Eli, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely echo those answers of kind of thinking about the macro level. What jumps out for me on just on a very personal level, like, was kind of a year ago when we knew there was this horrible pandemic, but we didn't know how it jumped, or how, we didn't really know to wear masks or how well distancing worked. And but we did know that it affected older people more than younger people. And for the first time, I really remember being worried about, like, my parents dying. And I know that's something that people worry about to varying degrees. And but it wasn't something that I had worried about before. And my grandparents and having that on my mind all the time was super scary. And just kind of that feeling of, like, oh my God, that, like, what's going to happen? Like, is this going to take a family member of mine? And now, thankfully, my parents are both vaccinated. All my grandparents are vaccinated. So that's definitely a weight off my chest at this point.
I so appreciate you saying that, just given when I was a kid, it's something I actually walked around worried about, but never felt the guts to say it out loud. I think kids probably think more about that than they're willing to articulate, because and by the way, when we send you off to college and to camp and all those places, the reason we're so emotional, you're like, why are they so crazy, is because it's our first recognition of separation and loss, for the ultimate one to come way down the road. But I think that's what happens to us in those moments. Nomi.
For me, I think two things. One is that to see how much hate some people carry around with themselves every single day. And you obviously want to believe the best in society, and to see that there's just, like, people out there that are just hateful is very disappointing. And then the second would be how forgetful people can be. But the people who can be forgetful, like, oh, I have my shot, I'm fine. Like, we're fine, we're out of it. Or, oh, the election's over, everything's fine, everything's fixed. Like, no, it doesn't end like that. So it's just kind of disappointing. Like, you can't just, like, stop at one point. But yeah.
Thanks. I want to ask all of you, one of the things that people have focused on a lot this year is how their relationships have changed with their family members, with people who they've been involved with in different ways, with classmates, girlfriends and boyfriends, friends, parents, siblings. And I think for many people, it's the proximity. Either you're really close, sometimes too close with the people you're not used to being that close with, or you're too far away because of the separation that the pandemic has insisted upon for us in terms of staying safe and staying healthy. So I wanted to ask you all, and I'll go back the other way. And Nomi, why don't you start out and tell us a little bit what you've learned or how some of the relationships in your life have changed?
Yeah, definitely every relationship has changed, because my friends, I don't really see them that often in person. But, like, now we do game nights on Zoom, which is fun, but it's like, it's different because I'm used to just like eating lunch with my friends every single day, talking to classmates, like even like not your best friends, but just like walking by peers and like, hello, and kind of realizing how nice those small interactions are. Yeah, and then not being able to see like a lot of family. Yeah, it's been strange. I definitely miss being with people in person. But it's also been nice because when my sisters came home from college, well, oldest one, we spent a lot of time together. So that was nice.
Sid, you're muted.
Sorry, yeah. Sorry, Jake, I'm gonna go to you.
I think I've definitely gotten closer with most members of the whole family in total. At some points, maybe too close. But we've had methods of spreading that out, and I definitely feel as a whole in the last 12 months we've gotten closer, especially in the first stage of lockdown from like March to the summer. And with friends, I feel like I don't know if my closeness or farness has changed with any of my friends relationships wise, but I feel like every time we gather in person, it's become more fulfilling and more meaningful, because instead of meeting or talking to each other in person 3, 4, 5 times a week, now it's maybe once every 2 weeks if we're lucky, or if we make the time to do it or get tested or whatever we need to do. I think it's made each relationship more fulfilling when we meet in person. And then for the family, we've gotten a lot closer over this time.
Okay, great. How about Isa and Ariella?
It was crazy to be sent home from college in the middle of my sophomore year, but was very fortunate in hindsight to have had so much time to be with my sisters and my parents, time that I wasn't necessarily expecting to ever have with them. You think you're going to go to college and you're going to move somewhere and you're never really going to live with your family in that same way ever again. So I think I was trying to focus on the positive of having extra time with my family. And then, being back at school, I think it's given me even more of the ability to only be with the people that I really want to be with. And, getting to sort of reflect on who do I spend my time with, who, am I going to be with, has been, I think, beneficial just long term.
I think that one of the weirdest parts of this whole pandemic was I was in such a transitional part of my life. Like I was finishing high school, and usually when you finish high school, you start to kind of see who the people that you're going to take with you into college from high school. And then all of a sudden I moved to the middle of the country where I didn't really have many friends, and all along we're supposed to social distance, and how can you socialize? How can you make friends when you physically are not supposed to be together? So I think that was definitely one of the major struggles of just being a freshman during this time, and like actually being on campus, and also just missing out on like the opportunities to go up to your professor after class and say, hi, like I really enjoyed lecture today. My name's Ariella, and I'm interested in this, and that. I think that those things have been really, really hard. And in some senses, I feel very limited to, I only got to meet X amount of people this year. But on the other hand, it's like, look at all these new people I met this year.
Thank you. How about you, Eli?
I think one interesting way it's changed, or kind of change relationships, as you see how your friends and family act under this like totally high risk, weird environment that you wouldn't have necessarily seen them kind of operate in under any other circumstances. So I guess I don't know. It's neither a negative or positive, but some of my friends haven't left their house, or barely have left their house in a year, and others are kind of going buck wild. So it's like that's just one interesting way it's affected relationships. And then I think the second one is just there's a lot of because you're kind of more concentrated on your tight circle, you lose a little bit of the ambient relationships that you had. And I really cared about those. And I'm excited to be able to have them back. But yeah, like, the friend that I would go play pickup basketball with, right? That's like, I'm just not seeing that guy. So yeah, that's just one. Those are a couple of my thoughts.
Thank you all. I wanted to ask a question that is specific to this particular group. On the one hand, you sort of represent, from juniors in high school through college students to, young professionals out in the world. You kind of represent generationally this broad swath. On the other hand, there's this very narrow group that we've assembled here. You are all what are known in our business as RKs, rabbis, kids. And it is a unique and special thing. And I don't know if we decided, Sid, at the end, if we were going to try to show that video, but we can put the link in for people that you can watch it on your own. Someone made a really kind of funny little video about what it is to be clergy children. And so here you are navigating the same pandemic that everyone else is navigating. And the unique piece for you is, you're also being roped into the broadcast of the Friday night service. And can you help me out with Havdalah? And can you film me? Or if it is filming time, maybe you're making some noise. And hypothetically, maybe your father freaks out and is screaming across the house, "Stop making noise. Can't you hear that I'm recording Shabbat services?" That happened with Sydney, actually, one time. But that's all the setup to the question. I'm wondering for any of you, and Jake, I'll give you the warning. We're going to start with you. Have there been moments in this last year as the son of a rabbi that you feel like you had to navigate the pandemic in a way that was different than your friends, your peers? And if so, maybe you can open up to all of the people who are joining us a little window into what it is to be an RK.
I would say the main thing is during the high holidays when I blew the shofar. I don't think anyone else had to go into a temple or a church or a mosque and blow a ram's horn in front of 100. I don't know how many people were watching on their Zoom, but in front of a camera and people behind me, and I felt like I was the only one there, but I know people were behind the screen. So it's kind of a weird feeling. And I'm pretty sure no one else I know has done that. So that's one thing differently. And another thing would be helping with Havdalah, that kind of stuff, and lighting candles and being on the Passover Seder Zoom. And besides from that, I don't think it's much differently, but the shofar is the only big thing I can remember right now.
Who wants to go next? And not everybody has to answer, but if you have a perspective on that, I think for me, it's interesting to hear what that was like for you navigating this in that regard.
That's because we're Yoshi. We like hearing our kids talk about us, right?
Only the positive things. So remember, we talked about that, kids, before. Yeah, go ahead.
I think that it doesn't necessarily have to do with being like you being a rabbi necessarily, but I think any kid who is now seeing what their parents do at work, there's a level of appreciation. I feel this for my mom as well as I do for my dad. You don't really recognize how much goes into one work day because when you're living at home, you're only worried about high school and this and that and what's going on in my life. And for once, you're like, wait, I actually don't have anything to do, but like my parents do, and they're working. And I think that develops some sort of like appreciation for just who they are, what they do on the day-to-day. Like a lot goes into being a rabbi, You might not think about it all the time, but like it made me feel very proud to be, the daughter of a rabbi and a really awesome Ima, mom, woman.
Kind of hard to follow that. I was just going to say, like, I don't think it differentiated me so much, like, as a person. I mean, same things apply to me that apply to anybody else. But maybe just, I don't know, and this might not be necessarily a direct result of my dad being a rabbi, but also just my involvement with Judaism gave me more tools, I think, to like sort of deal with what was going on. And I think like personally, like spirituality and like religion are very important to me. And I think I've noticed like some of my friends who like don't care as much about like their religions. I don't know if that was why they had a harder time like grappling with what was going on. But like for me personally, I feel like the religion helped me grapple with what was going on.
Thank you.
I think just briefly, the one what jumped to mind when you asked that question was on Rosh Hashanah the night before. I actually, both of my moms were leading services, and if everyone remembers, about an hour before services, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, just doing a toggle browser between both of my mom's services and watching them navigate this massive weight of the first High Holy Days, not in person in generations, and then maybe ever, and then also this massive figure dying. I certainly was like, wow, being a rabbi, being a leader in the Jewish community is just a massive weight to carry on your shoulders. Maybe I gained a little bit of appreciation for that.
Want to add anything?
Well, just like this goes for anyone who's religious at all, but getting ready for a holiday, Jewish holidays, is nice because it's like, oh, like I have this to look forward to. Like I can build a sukkah, or I can make a Passover meal, and it'll feel like a little bit special and different than like every other day. So yeah, that's been nice.
I just want to say on behalf of the rabbis on this call, and probably all rabbis, all clergy everywhere, but more broadly, all working parents out there, that so much support, and so many of the things that we needed to do, I know from my hairstylist right here, or camera operator, or sending something to, just being together and say, hey, what do y'all think of this? Really, really, really helpful. So thank you for hanging in there with us.
Yeah, you guys have been incredible. There's a million stories I could tell, and most of them will not embarrass my kids. But when it was just when Jake was 3, Talia was born, and Talia about 2 weeks later ended up in the hospital for a week, very seriously ill with spinal tap, and I wouldn't quite call it touch and go, but it was really scary. And Lauren, one of us, had to sleep in the hospital. And it was Rosh Hashanah, so it wasn't going to be me, and it was only my second holy days, so still trying to get my feet as a senior rabbi at this place, and that was it. So like Jake was with me, and it was time for me to give my dry run. I always give a sermon to the empty sanctuary the day before the holiday, so I'm like, Jake, you got to come with me. And I said, just sit down in the pew and please don't rip the prayer books. I don't know what else to say to him, and he sat there. And, and Yoshi and Sid give me a hard time because I speak a little bit longer than they do at services. And so as you can imagine, the dry run was even longer. And so I must have gone 25 or 30 minutes in the dry run. And I walk out with Jake. I said, so what do you think? He says, it wasn't bad. It was much shorter than I thought. And I thought, okay, if my 3-year-old kid with his sister deathly ill in the hospital can sit through this, then the sermon's going to be fine. And that was my first experience of actually feeling supported by my kids without my kids even knowing it. So I would say to all of you, the smiles you flash us, the sarcastic remarks you make to us lovingly, and just the hugs after these things, for me, have always been well worth more than any kind of congratulations that I would get from being a rabbi at synagogue. It just means the world. With that, I want to ask one of the things that you guys might not know that we really try hard to achieve with this Book of Life project. And I do wonder sometimes what it's like for all of you to see the 3 of us who were kids together in rabbinic school. Think about it. Yoshi was 22 And, you know, Sid was 24 and I was 25. I mean, we were really young, you know, Eli, your age actually, which is just incredible. And we watched all of you be born from afar and near, and it's meant a lot to us. So give us some advice about how, and really be honest, we will not be embarrassed about how we can better navigate lives as rabbis and as adults. But, you know, if you could say, God, I really want to tell my parents this, or my dad this, or my mom this, this is your opportunity. Tell us what we need to be doing differently, better, calmer about the way we're navigating our lives these days. Because I'm guessing every other parent out there needs the same advice. So I always feel better because now who's first? So take a deep breath, and I guess we'll go with Eli because, again, that's what happens when the oldest. Eli, go ahead.
Oh man. Advice for you guys. The fact that I can't think of much has got to be a good sign. Maybe I'll pass and come back.
That's
to
okay.
me.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Actually, is there anyone who wants to jump in, who has something that's come to mind? How about that?
Well, it appears
Sure,
as though my dad has grown to love his dog even more, which is a little concerning, but I'm really glad that he's there with you to make you happy. No, but in all seriousness, I think that one thing I've seen my dad go through throughout this process is realizing that he doesn't have to hold the weight of everything on his shoulders. I think that he's always been a very like calm and collected person, but this experience, I think, for everyone is very humbling. You realize you only have so much of an impact and you can only go so far, you know? And I think that knowing that ultimately there will be things and times that come about that just change everything and you really don't have much control over it. I think that that's like a very important aspect of life to understand and acknowledge, just in general. You know, you have to live too.
Others who want to give us advice? That's a tough question.
I want to give you guys some advice, but I always want to give Yoshi and Matt advice.
I know.
And you do. And you.
Well, I will say that it's been like having, you know, two more amazing brothers to go through this with, and that we've all been so accustomed to being in these little boxes now, whether we're in school in these boxes or we're at services or we're at work. These little boxes have become our lives. And I want to ask you all a question because it's been really interesting for me when I've asked older people, older than us and older than you, what, as Passover is around the corner this Saturday and Sunday night, the Festival of Freedom, and we think about what we took for granted before the pandemic, and we think about the ways that we have felt really encumbered by this and in a very narrow place, either physically or spiritually. I wonder, and I've asked, what is it that you're looking forward to being free from this year? And what kind of freedom specifically are you looking forward to? And it's been interesting, I say, because when I've asked older people that, I thought it was going to be things that they aspired to that were so important to them before. And many people said, just shopping at Trader Joe's, which I haven't done in a year, or going out to a meal with a friend. The very simple things that we took for granted that didn't even seem like freedoms. Are there things that you are imagining now that you have felt encumbered by and in a very narrow place that as Passover reaches into our hearts that you feel like you're looking forward to in terms of more freedom?
Well, for the second part, definitely going back to school and being in a classroom and like sitting at lunch with my friends and just like going to school. So I guess the first one is like, sorry. Yeah, school. Okay, sorry.
Going back to school.
I got confused.
Going back to school.
Okay.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting. Nomi, it's like, think about before, like could you imagine freedom being going back to school?
I know.
Like 2 years ago, I can't wait to go back to school. I feel so free there. It's a whole different world now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of
anyone else.
If you said, you know, you're going to get several months where you don't have to get up early in the morning, you don't have to drive to school and all that stuff, like part of that would sound good. And then as you thought about it more, you'd be like, no, not so good.
I would say is once I get the vaccine, is being able to go out, and I'm not that I'm going to be stupid or anything, but is going out and having fun and relaxing and not having to worry about. I mean, I'm going to worry about it, but not that I'm going to be in the front of my mind every time that I go out and have fun and have a baseball season and do everything that I couldn't have done the last month, or I mean last year, starting soon. It's everything that I miss: going back to school, having a season, going out and having fun, going out to eat, just everything that I did 2 years ago that I haven't done the past year, going back to like life being normal again.
A couple for me would be just like losing that, you know, feeling of a little bit of guilt when you go see somebody and you're like, is this okay? You know, we're outside, we're 6 feet apart, but you know, I don't want to infect you, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't think that will go away immediately, but I think eventually it will, which will definitely feel like freedom. And then also just the normal stuff, like, you know, chatting with a stranger, you know, as you're on a walk, or, you know, grabbing a beer with a friend, like stuff like that will be, will feel very freeing once that's okay again.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I'm very excited to be free from like the worry, just like, oh, is it okay that I saw this person? Like, do we think it's okay? And like trying to like consider all the possible outcomes. And then also like the worry of like, oh my God, what if I'm the one who, like, God forbid, infects all my friends? So free from that. And yeah, I'm just excited for that.
I am most looking forward to seeing and being with my family again. Not like the immediate 5 of us, even though I love you guys and it's been amazing. I think that like I realized how family oriented we are. You know, not being able to see my grandparents, shout out, Grandma, Grandpa, Poppy and Debbie, Poppy, Neil and Linda, see you're all here. But it's been so like sad and hard, and you know, those are the people that make you the happiest, and you don't always accept that that's always true, because you know, if you're with like the 5 of us all the time, it was really easy for me to be like, okay, I want to be alone. Like, I want to be alone for a really long time. And now that we have been alone for a really long time, we realize we actually want to be together and be with our family.
One of the things that we talk about in Book of Life is the opportunity to write a letter to your future self. You know, imagine 5 years out, 10 years out, 20 years out. Where do you want to be in your spiritual life? Where do you want to be in your emotional life, in your religious life? And so for each of you, in any order you want, and feel free to pass if you want to, I want you just to imagine 10 years from now, 15, 20 years from now, which is already a hard thing to do, looking back on this last year of pandemic, which is a once in a 100-year, we hope, less even, but or more even, more than once in 100 years kind of experience. But here it is, the first time in all of our lives that we've experienced such a moment. Going forward 10, 20 years, what do you think you'll look back on this experience in terms of your growth? How has it changed you? How will you be an entirely different person than you otherwise would have been were it not for this experience? How have you grown? What has it revealed about you? So again, kind of thinking about that future self, looking back on this moment, and anyone can share something that you've learned, something that you've discovered along the way.
I think I sort of mentioned this also earlier, but just intentions with who I spend my time on, or what I spend my time on, I think will be the biggest takeaway from this. I mean, I think the whole world is united in the experience to greater or lesser degree, we all went through the pandemic. I'm so fortunate that I was able to go through it the way that I did and be supported by my family and friends. But I definitely think like that will be my like takeaway, I guess, just like gratitude despite what we went through, and just like, you know, being more intentional.
I think, sorry, Jake. Go ahead.
I would say pivoting and problem solving. 20 years from now, I think I can look back and be like, I learned especially how to pivot from bad situations and make them into good situations or better situations. Like, okay, this is not an option anymore with COVID. Let's pivot and let's try something new. Or we can't hang out together anymore, so let's hop on a Zoom. Just new solutions, new problems, new solutions. And I think over the past year, I've learned how to pivot better. And that's going to help me through college and my career and et cetera after that too.
I think maybe one for me is just like, you know, if I didn't already know how lucky I am to kind of be in my position, that, you know, this really drove it home, you know, the fact that I can work remotely and support myself that way without having to go it, and the fact that, you know, I don't have any kind of predetermining risk factors that make me more likely to get very ill from COVID is another one. So I think those are some things that really are like, oh wow, you kind of cruised through COVID. Like there's a reason for that. Hey-o.
Look who joined.
I want to just jump in and introduce my younger son. You could rename yourself if you want, or you could be Rabbi Sidney Mintz. I know you don't want to be Rabbi Sidney Mintz. Gabe Newbern Mintz.
Probably used my Zoom last.
Yeah. Why don't you just, we're in the middle of talking about this. Just tell everybody who you are, where you are, and what you're doing.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gabriel Newbern Mintz. I have two beautiful mothers, Sidney Mintz and Deborah Newbern. I am currently living in the Lake Tahoe area, working as a lifty at Squaw Valley and taking a semester off of school.
Great. We were just in the middle, I think, of our last, I can see Issa and Ariella. You guys haven't seen Gabe's hair like that yet. So a lot of things have changed this year, and not just our appearances. So I think Eli was just finishing up. Anybody else want to jump in about that in terms of, Gabe, we were talking about one of the things, or many of the things that we've learned in terms of pivoting. Do you want to address something that you've learned this year that you might, Yoshi asked, a lot of the Book of Life is about kind of partnering with your future self. And are there things when you think about yourself 5 or 10 or even 20 years from now that you look back that this year was a learning for you that was helpful about resilience or pivoting or change?
Yeah, I definitely don't think that I've had to deal with something so drastic in my life before that has changed the way that I've seen my future going and the way that my path has been set out in front of me. And so I think that there's been a lot of silver linings within that, seeing as like during the quarantine, I found a lot of like little odd jobs to do and stuff that I felt was fulfilling and made it so that I didn't feel trapped and alone during the quarantine. And then once I went back to school for the first semester, I thought everything was going to be back to normal and everything was going to be okay. And it just kind of wasn't the same. And so to pivot again and to decide to take another semester off, I had learned from the beginning of quarantine how to do that and how to find something that was fulfilling and not making me feel like the pandemic was controlling my life was a super valuable thing that I learned from having to do this. Thank you.
So one of the things that we imagined during this time period is if you, since you know you guys all have something in common, which is being RKs, do you have any questions for us and obviously you don't have to ask your own parent because, you know, they're right there most of the time, but do you have any questions for any of us about this year and about the learning and what we're sharing during this time?
I have a question, not so much for my dad, but for Sydney and Matthew. I think a lot of people have felt hopeless during this time, and one of the things I have found throughout Judaism is the sense of hope. And my question is, as leaders of communities that, you know, are supposed to help their congregants feel hopeful during this really not hopeful time, how did you navigate that? Especially, I mean, I'd admit that at times I wasn't hopeful, so I'm assuming that's a very common feeling. So like, how did you go about having this responsibility to help other people feel hopeful even if you yourself didn't?
Thank you. That's a, you know, it's a great question. I actually, I'll say that I could share that from Yoshi and Matt and I interviewing somebody who wasn't Jewish, who isn't Jewish, who's an incredible author whose name is Anne Lamott. And she said that showing up and bringing somebody water, sometimes the most important thing you could do. The two things, showing up and bringing somebody water. And that really resonated for me as a rabbi and as a human being at a time when I feel like as rabbis, we get so wrapped up in what do we have to offer? What strength? How can we alleviate people's pain and suffering? And for me, that brought it back to what people really needed from us this year was sometimes just to see our face, sometimes just to hear our voice, and just to be calm and breathe together and say, there's going to be an end to this and we don't know what the answer is, but we're going to be doing it together. It was just a very simple, helpful piece for me. How about you, Matt?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm sure Jake knew this would come at one point. We had a teacher in rabbinic school that actually Yoshi and Sid, I don't know if you got to study with David Sperling because you guys came later to New York, but he would always say to us, in the end, all of you only preach one sermon throughout your whole life. And you just sort of refine that message over and over again. So when I get really stressed out before the holidays about, you know, what am I going to speak about? Jake will inevitably say, Dad, you speak about the same thing every year anyway. It's either hope or it's optimism. And just do that again. That's all you talk about anyway. So it's funny to get reflections from you guys about what you think that one sermon is. But Ariel, I would say that telling the truth, and I don't mean as opposed to telling a lie. I mean, sort of like, you know, if you read about Churchill or even, I know he's become not a popular figure, but why Giuliani was so important to New York in 9/11, where I was living at that time, was because if you get up and just narrate what the actual truth is and you don't make believe, somehow when you're able to talk about how dark it is, it's at that point that people could start to look for the light again, but not until someone says, this is too much for us to bear. Or as Eli so beautifully said, like, wait a minute, 500,000, like just stop and say that number. And somehow and counterintuitively, people feel comforted by that. And then you have to start to work at it, but they feel relieved that someone is going to tell them or affirm for them just how bad it actually feels. And it seems simple, but most people don't do it.
Well, all I'd add is what Sydney referenced earlier, which is a chavruta, you know, having people that you can spend time with, that you can cry with, that you can laugh with, bounce ideas off of. That's been this wonderful, wonderful thing for me, just in terms of navigating it. And then to try to facilitate that for other people. So, you know, my weekly Talmud class, knowing that one really beautiful thing to see this year is my aunt and uncle started joining my Talmud class. They live in Kansas City. They started coming every Wednesday, and that would not have been possible prior to the pandemic because I wasn't Zooming my class. And what was really beautiful to see is watching people kind of get to know them and for them to get to know other regulars in the class. And you realize that you can find ways to form chavruta, that sense of community, that sense of not being alone in this. in surprising ways, ways you wouldn't have imagined. It's not the same. Eli, you talked earlier about, that friend that you would play pickup basketball with that you're just not going to see right now. So it's not the same, but it's still possible. And, Jake, you talked about pivoting and, okay, so can't see my friends this way, I'll find another way. Naomi talked about, game night with their friends. If I'd have told you a year and a half ago, hey, on Saturday nights, we'll Zoom in with our friends and get dressed up and, we'll play Kahoot, everybody's favorite game. You'd be like, no, I don't think that that's going to happen. But then that becomes something that you're really looking forward to because it's another way to make community. So Sid, Matthew, I can't remember who's got the last question, but take it away and take us home.
Yeah, I mean, Sid, I don't know if you have any more questions. I've been just sitting here thinking, and I think it's obvious to the folks out there who have been with us for now over a year, actually, the Book of Life is over a year, that we always talk about the three of us and our connection, but we've gone through different iterations of relationship, mostly because of distance. And what's given me hope is to be able to be with a couple of people that no matter what, come prep day, which is Thursday at 4 on the East Coast, I know I can tell them, Yoshi and Sydney, anything that's going on in my life. It could be tearful, but it always ends up somehow making me laugh. And when in doubt, I know I have that Tuesday afternoon at 4 o'clock. And there are texts that go by all the time where in the end we'll just say, it's okay, I love you. And it's actually just picks me up. And my youngest, who's not on the screen, my girls are 13 and 12, just coming to their Benot Mitzvah next October. But when we first were able to get together, we gathered in Northern California, and we met with tech people and scholars and spent a lot of time studying. But we also spent a lot of time laughing and talking deeply about life, getting us up on surfboards. And so finally, my youngest daughter says, "Are you still at that learning thing that you do?" Like, it seems like you're having too much fun for a conference. And that's what happens. My message to you guys is that you can meet lifelong colleagues that are not just professional, but become siblings to you. And I only really hope that you guys, and maybe you already have, find people that we have found in each other, that you have safety and honesty with, that really makes life better. So it's not a question, it's my closing. It's my, I have no ability but to try to give advice. And it's not lost on me that, looking at Eli, most of all, Eli, there's one favorite memory of mine was your mom and I last service at HUC, and we all come in for a final thing. And I got to know you well enough. You will obviously never remember this because you were a year old, but where you actually put your hands out to come to me instead of your mom, and you put your head on my shoulder and leaned, and for the rest of the service, you just rested your head there. And on one hand, I can't believe that we don't know each other. On the other hand, I've known you your whole life, and to watch each other's kids grow up is just extraordinary. And Gabe, I can tell you stories about Israel, etc., and even about Holocaust Yoshi, which we're not going to open up with tonight. But that's the point, is that I hope that continues forever, and you guys have what we have with each other.
Thank you, Matt, for leaving that question. That is so beautiful, and I know that Yoshi and I feel the same way. But I will say that I hope that all of you and your siblings who aren't here with us write down some of the stuff from this year, because there's going to be an after the pandemic, and you are going to really want to, we're talking about right now, like projecting ourselves. What's it going to be? Is there going to be a hybrid world, and our relationships have changed so much, and are we going back? But I really encourage all of you to do some just like short videos and write your letters to yourself about what was this world like? What were you like? What were your relationships like? What were your hopes and your apprehensions? Because your kids and the next generations are going to be asking you for sure, what was it like? What was it like that year? It sounds crazy. It sounds so scary. Were you hopeful at all? And you guys just blew us away with how eloquent you are and just able to share yourself and be vulnerable with us. So I just want to tell you that you really, what I started saying, you're our teachers, and we're going to continue to learn from you as you project into the future, a hopeful place. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I can't remember whose idea it was. I know it wasn't mine. I think it was Sydney's, maybe Matthew's, to interview our kids. And I'm so grateful, because we'll have this record. And I'm so proud of all of you. And I look forward to being able to spend time, of course, with my own kids, but I want to spend more time with you, Jake, and get to know you a little bit better. I've been lucky to get to know Eli and Gabe over the years, and Jake, your sisters. But I'm sure for everybody listening, and I saw a couple of notes coming through on my messages, just how inspired and hopeful people listening to this are feeling because of you. So thank you all so very much. 1 month from today, Sydney, will you give us the promo for our next webinar? Tell us a little bit about our guest.
We're going to be in conversation, 3 rabbis, with Pastor Corey Canard, who has been on the front lines and is an incredible spiritual leader in Florida, where he's based, but all over the United States, and has been doing a lot of work around what has happened to mental health and the support that we're going to need in the future to get through what the after looks like. He's a dear friend of mine, a fellow clergy person, and he's very hopeful, very warm, compassionate, brilliant man. So he'll be with us. And then I think we have Noah Tishby joining us in April, who just wrote a fabulous book. Oh, in May. That's right. And then in
Pastor Canard is April 22nd.
That's right, April 22nd.
At the end of May. And then June,
we have our old and dear friend, Dr. Larry Brilliant, coming back to talk with us. The guy who told us last February, this is going to last at least a year, rabbis. And we went, he sounds like he knows what he's talking about. So here we are. So thanks so much for all of us being together again. And we hope you'll join us for the Book of Life in a couple of weeks, and then for our webinar in April.
Chag Sameach, everyone. Aziz and Pesach.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.